can dive into their situation and help them realize, like, look, you are losing thousands of dollars by not selling and buying something else. Just building up that rapport with these sellers over time to where they trust you and they're going to believe what you say. That is what we are getting paid for. It's not just the taking the property from listing to closing. It's everything before that, prepping the property to hit the market, and prepping the seller to accept an offer that a buyer can come in and take advantage of that opportunity.
Welcome to the Apartment Investing Journey, where we explore every facet of multifamily investing and development with top investors, brokers, and service providers who share their strategies, successes, and secrets to help you on your apartment investing journey.
Hey guys, welcome to the Apartment Investing Journey. My name is David Robinson. Our guest on the show today is Kris Mortensen with Marcus Millichap. Kris, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for taking the time to come on and share some thoughts and tell us a little bit about your journey. A little bit about Kris. Kris is a commercial real estate agent and specializes in the acquisition and disposition of multifamily and student housing properties. He started his career with Marcus Millichap in 2016. And then in 2017, he joined the Shin-Zylstra multifamily team. We've had Brock on the show in a previous episode. The Shin-Zylstra team has successfully transacted over $1 billion of multifamily and student housing properties. In 2017, the team accounted for over 50% of all multifamily sales in the state of Utah. Prior to joining Marcus Millichap, Kris attended the University of Utah for his undergrad in accounting and a master's of business administration. In addition, he has 5+ years of experience in the development side of the real estate business with Mountain West Real Estate Development. That's a little bit about Kris. Kris, maybe just take a second, back up, tell us your story. How did you even get into this multifamily space? How did this process work for you? Maybe back up and tell us you graduated from high school, and then take us from there.
Yeah. So, even before I graduated from high school, I was kind of always surrounded by real estate because my dad has always been in real estate. That's been his career path. He was a broker. He worked for Albertsons, developing shopping centers for Albertsons. And then after doing that for several years, he decided to continue developing. Similarly, he did a lot of deals with Albertsons, but he did it on his own. So he was able to stake some ownership in the deals, doing it that way. And to this day, that's what he's continued to do. He continues to develop real estate. And so in high school, even junior high school, my dad would often take me to his work. He'd let me see what he was doing. I thought it was the most boring thing ever. All he ever did was sit on the phone in front of his desk. And so I told him when I was younger that it was really boring. And little did I know that I would catch the real estate bug too. So then after graduating from high school, served an LDS mission in California, and then went to school, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I was taking business classes. I knew I wanted to do business, but I didn't know exactly what I wanted to focus on. All I know is that every teacher and my parents all wanted me to graduate from college. That's what everybody was telling me that I needed to do, so I did. At a certain point, I'd finished all of the undergraduate work in the business school, and I had to pick a degree. And so I chose to go with accounting, which in hindsight has turned out to be a little bit of a blessing. The accounting degree at the U was really great. But as you can imagine, most of the careers that they help people get once you get an accounting degree is with public accounting. And that was a route that I never wanted to go. It just never interested me. And so instead, I got an accounting job with the LDS Church here in Salt Lake City after I graduated. And I started that. I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the people that I worked with. It allowed my wife to stop working because we had recently had a child, and so she was able to stay home. And that was a big blessing for our family. So it worked out really good in the time. But over a short period of time, it wasn't really fulfilling my itch to really grow. It was kind of a really slow-moving environment. And I knew that it probably wasn't going to be a long-term deal for me. So I started exploring other options. My dad's like, hey, why don't you get into real estate? You can become a broker. And like I said, we just recently had a child and my wife was at home. I wasn't ready to take that dive into a job that was 100% commission yet. And I should have done it when I wasn't married. That was the bigger mistake. I should have done it a lot earlier. But From there, I went back to school while I was still working. I did the professional MBA program.
While you did the professional MBA program while you were still working as an accountant for the church?
Yes, exactly.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay.
so while I was still working for them, I did that. And I guess I should say, while I was doing my undergrad in accounting, I was working for my dad's real estate company. I was his gopher. He called me his gopher because I would go and do whatever he told me to do. So just got a lot of experience on the development side there, then got the accounting job, then started doing my MBA. And my motivation really to do the MBA was to find something new and different, right? So 2 years later, I graduated. I was kind of in the same place in my job. Nothing had really changed there. I now had this new fancy master's degree, kind of looked around for other jobs, and nothing was really hitting all the buttons that I wanted for my career. I wanted something where I could have more control of my time, where I would be in charge, or at least feel in charge of the type of income that I could produce for me and my family. And a lot of the corporate world just didn't offer that. And so finally, after working at the church as an accountant for 3.5 years, I finally was like, you know what? I haven't been happy doing this. I haven't found another job that's really going to meet my criteria. I'm going to dive into being a real estate broker. So I took the classes and interviewed with a lot of different companies. And so I started off in the retail world. And that's where my dad was. That's kind of where my experience was. So it made a lot of sense at the time. But I don't know if it was the millennial in me or something else. I always wanted to do multifamily because I didn't believe in retail long term. I order everything off of Amazon. It was almost like I was trying to sell a product that I didn't 100% believe in, on a case-by-case basis. So, and what I mean by that is like some retail is still great and I would buy it myself, but some of it isn't. Whereas like multifamily, I totally believe in. I saw the value. I saw a lot of my friends never buying houses. They always wanted to rent. Multifamily always made sense to me. So I came in, I worked hard. I closed a few deals, actually closed a couple Dollar Generals in Florida. So I was working all over the country. And that was one of the other things that I didn't necessarily love is that I was calling people all over. I never met with them face to face. And it was hard to build up that rapport with people. So after working hard for a long time, kind of making ends meet barely, Danny and Brock decided they were ready to grow their team. And so they invited me to join them. And I said that I would love to. And so I jumped on the chance. So it was kind of like starting over again because the retail world and the multifamily world, although they're both commercial real estate, it's not the same people. It's not the same players. You got to kind of build it up again from scratch. So I did. And I've been doing that since January of last year. So I think this is month number 19. And things are really, it takes a long time to get started as a real estate broker. And now in month 19, it finally feels like things are really starting to push forward and getting a lot more momentum on stuff. So that's a long answer, but that's how I got to where I'm at today.
So yeah, man, thanks for giving us some background and how you got into the space. You've got a pretty cool story with your dad being in the business. I find it interesting that, your dad's been in the retail side for a long time. And here you are, although you're following the footsteps of dad, but you are taking a little bit of a different path as well. So that's great.
Yeah. And what's funny about that is that he, right now, he feels the same pressures about retail that everybody hears in the news. He owns, I don't want to say any specifics, but he owns a large, amount of square footage. And the big boxes that he owns have been a stress in his life. And he's like, every single time I have to fill a big box, there's tons of tenant improvements. And it's like I'm building a unique building for each different tenant. And he keeps saying, I got to get into apartments. I got to sell these deals and get into apartments. So he feels the same kind of, stress on retail that I saw, and which kind of pushed him towards apartments instead of retail.
I have a few questions about, now most of our listeners are, potential investors or are actively investing in multifamily or are, active syndicators or professionals, property managers, brokers, et cetera. I'm interested in diving a little bit into, the challenges you face on the broker side. Now, we had one of your partners, Brock, and a good friend of mine on the show a handful of episodes ago. It was awesome to have him on. We decided to bring you on because I felt like you would bring a little bit different perspective to the table in that you're focused on apartment buildings, I believe ranging roughly from 60 or from 6 to roughly 60 units. Is that correct?
Yeah. 6 is probably still a little small. 8 is the smallest I've ever done.
Okay.
I'm not really so, but close. Yeah. 8 to 60 is kind of my range. And
okay.
In that range, there's definitely a different, mostly there's a different clientele than what Brock is working on with Danny on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and that was the reason for having you come on, because I feel like you're going to be able to speak to a lot of our listeners' needs. A lot of our listeners are, individuals or syndicators that are open to smaller apartment buildings versus going, larger 100, 200, 300 plus. One of the questions I have for you is, what have been the biggest challenges you faced entering the multifamily brokerage space? Not that most of our listeners are going to be getting into the brokerage business, but I'm curious, what were the challenges that you faced as you got into the business?
Yeah. So, I don't know if this applies to like people that are looking to invest, but maybe it does. Maybe it'll help them understand. Being a new broker, you talk to a lot of people. I was averaging 250 phone calls a week, cold calls, just trying to reach out to property owners, find out what their deal was. Where do they sit? Do they have plans to sell? Are they looking to buy? And when you're new and you don't have much to offer in way of inventory or experience, that's hard for somebody to take seriously. Now, working with Brock and Danny, that was shortened, I think, quite a bit. Those guys have a good reputation in the community. And so working with them has definitely helped in that. So that was kind of my initial problem. One that I feel like I've started to overcome is all those cold calls that I made are now coming back, and people are I still try to contact everybody at least 4 times a year. And now that people are starting to recognize my name, a lot of times they're calling me to help them with their deals as of the other way around. So that's kind of changed a little bit for me recently. And it's one of the reasons why the wheels have started to get in faster motion than they were in the beginning. Now, I think one of the biggest challenges that I have is just the disconnect between what a buyer thinks is a good, fair deal and what a seller thinks is a good, fair deal. There's just, as you know, every buyer wants to find something with a 10% return on a perfect A-plus location and be able to get, the best lending. And sellers want to sell their property for a 4%, 4 cap, close in 30 days kind of a thing. And so there is a disconnect in today's market between buyers and sellers that we're having to bridge the gap with on a regular basis with almost every deal that we're doing.
Let me ask you, what are some of the strategies that you use to help potential clients find opportunities especially in your niche of that, 8 to 60 unit range? I think investors need to understand maybe on a deeper level the value that you're bringing to the table in finding opportunities, finding the deals that are out there, because that's saving an investor an enormous amount of time, energy, money, and resources that you're deploying to identify listings that are potential opportunities for buyers before they even hit the market. Tell us a little bit about that process.
Exactly. When you say that, one of the first things that came to mind is people complaining about how much we get paid when a deal's done. And what they don't see is the 2 years of talking to that seller or buyer, showing them deals or showing them comparables of the market, building up this relationship with them and showing them why they should be selling. Because I focus in Utah. I try to do all my work in Utah, a little bit in Idaho. And in Utah, there is quite a mentality of, I'm never going to sell this property, ever. It doesn't matter the circumstances. I own it free and clear. I have no reason to sell. Well, I talk to people like that all the time. And if you can dive into their situation and help them realize, like, look, you are losing thousands of dollars by not selling and buying something else. Just building up that rapport with these sellers over time to where they trust you and they're going to believe what you say. That is what we are getting paid for. It's not just the taking the property from listing to closing. It's everything before that, prepping the property to hit the market, and prepping the seller to accept an offer that a buyer can come in and take advantage of that opportunity. And I was just going to try to answer your other question as far as like, what are the strategies there? Thinking about that, the main strategy is just knowing where people are at, understanding what their real motivation is. And a lot of times that motivation is not price. A lot of times it's wealth preservation for their family. A lot of times they want the depreciation to help them on their taxes. So there's a lot of other motivations that fall into it, besides I'm just going to sell for the top price. And if you can dig that up, then you can help buyers find an opportunity for a property that's going to fit their criteria, as well as a seller being able to get top dollar for that property. And the goal is on both sides that the seller is going to be able to sell and either cash out at a price that they like, or they're going to be able to roll that into a new property and recapture new depreciation, recapture an investment on the equity that they built up, and just try to make it a win-win with both parties.
Can you think of a specific instance that you've had over the last year where you had to reach out to the potential owner and help them understand the benefit of selling in the market now to take advantage of those things that you discussed? Can you think of a situation that we might be able to talk about?
Yeah, there's probably a couple. The first one was a deal that we closed earlier this year. And in that example, it closed the particular property. Well, we'll keep it vague. It closed earlier this year. And the year before that was the first time that I made contact with this property owner. Talked to him, found out, he may be considering selling. After talking to him every month for a whole year, I didn't get the listing for 9 months.
Wow.
Right? So it took me 9 months of talking to this gentleman and saying, hey, it's probably a good time to sell. From what you told me, you hate running the property. You want to get out of it. You're getting a better return in the stock market. For all these reasons, let me take a crack at your property. Finally convinced him to list the property, and we were able to find a buyer through a agent in California on that one. And so the seller ended up happy because he was able to get, after going through the process, I know that we got him the top price that he could get in the market. Just fielding all the offers for what came in. I know we did the best job of anybody for him on that property, and he was happy at the end. He was at the closing table. Throughout the process, he was kind of grumpy and didn't really want to sell, and kind of gave me a hard time on a lot of different things. But at the closing table, he was making jokes and he was happy. And so at the end of it, I know that at the end of the process, he was happy and he was able to accomplish the goals that he wanted to. So that was my first example. Did you have a follow-up question on that?
Yeah, I was just curious. Maybe share with us a little bit about what those first few months were like. I think investors need to understand the process that brokers go through to get to a place where there's a listing that they can potentially buy and the value that you bring to the table. Maybe talk to us, like, what were those conversations like early on?
So, I think honestly, I'm not going to sit here and say that I remember every call perfectly, but I remember this guy specifically that he said, the first couple times that I called him, he said, I'm not selling, and he hung up.
Really?
Yeah, Marcus Millichap agents, we do a lot of cold calling. When I say, hey, this is Kris Mortensen with Marcus Millichap, a lot of people recognize that and know exactly what's coming next. And so we get a lot of quick answers and hang-ups, and that just happens. So you get better on the phone, you bring more value instead of just saying, hey, do you want to sell? You say, hey, this property's for sale, or you say, here's a nearby property that just sold that's going to affect your property, right? And so we got to have that market knowledge to share with people to get them interested in talking to us more about selling or buying. And so this particular gentleman, I remember I found a property that had recently sold nearby his, and I said, hey, I know I've called you a couple times. I wanted to let you know about this property that sold over here. And that piqued his interest. And finally, I got a foot in the door with him, and he said, well, and after explaining to him about this property, the nearby comparable that had sold, I asked him, hey, have you ever thought about selling? And he's like, well, I tried to a couple years ago. It didn't work out very well. Maybe I'll do it in the future, but my health's not very good right now. I don't want it. And so it was just following up from there. Finally, I got a foot in the door, created a little rapport with this guy, And then over time, just following up with him each month, letting him know about new things that were happening in his area, things that he would care about. He finally was like, I think I'm ready to start looking at selling it. And then at that point, it still isn't sold. I still had to go put an evaluation together, collect all of his numbers, collect his rent roll, put an evaluation together, let him know what I think it could sell for. And even from that point, it still took 3 more months for him to sign on the dotted line.
Yeah.
So it was like I had to convince him that the way I underwrote or looked at his property was the right way to look at it.
Yeah.
And so it just takes a lot of time, a lot of following up. And it's not, and a lot of times it's not like something where I can like say on Monday I'm going to follow up with him, and on Tuesday I'm going to get him to do this, and on Wednesday you're kind of at their whim a little bit at the timetable that they want to work on. And so you just do your due diligence and following up as much as you can, or as much as you feel comfortable with, and getting them ready to sell that property.
Man, great explanation, and thanks for going into a little bit more detail on that. It's valuable to understand, the process. I think conceptually we understand, what brokers do, but I don't think. I think all too often we underestimate how much time and energy and resources and money go into identifying potential opportunities. And so, thanks for taking some time to walk us through that. Another question I have for you, we talked with Brock earlier about the bigger deals where a lot of institutional money's coming into Utah to acquire those type of opportunities. What do you see as the biggest opportunities for potential buyers in that, 8 to 60 unit range?
Well, one of the things I mentioned earlier is that a lot of these properties have been owned by the same owner for a long period of time. And because of that, people, I feel like in general, as if we're painting with a broad brush, people take pretty good care of their properties. Not everybody's perfect. Some are better than others. But there's a lot of properties out there that have been well maintained, but they don't have any debt on the property. So there's no real pressure to get the rents up to market. And so I've been working with a lot of property owners where their units need to be renovated. There's some things around the property that need to be fixed, some capital expenditures, some deferred maintenance. That's the word I'm looking for, deferred maintenance. But the rents are low. And so there's an opportunity for buyers to come in, purchase these properties, take care of all the work, do the renovations, boost those rents up to where they should be in the market, and create a lot of value on the back end of that property. A lot of the buyers that I'm working with, that is their main number one goal. Now, I will say a lot of that low-hanging fruit in our market has been picked. So those value-add deals are becoming less and less. And because like the process I explained with getting somebody to agree to sell, I can go through that whole process with them, show them the amount that they could sell for, and it would be a perfect value add, but they still say no, right? So even though there is other value add deals, we're still trying to convince sellers to sell. And so I think that there's still opportunities out in the market, but the huge explosion in value is going to be fewer and farther between now.
How do you see the market shifting in the coming, you don't have a crystal ball, I understand that. But you mentioned that it's becoming more difficult to identify value add opportunities. They're still there, but they're not as plentiful as they were in past years. How is the market going to shift? Because a lot of money has come into this space for the value add opportunities, and being able to obtain the returns that are really difficult to find anywhere else. So as those value add opportunities start to shrink and maybe even potentially go away at some point, how does the market shift for you? What does that look like for you?
Well, one of the main things that we're looking at is interest rates. We all thought at the end of last year that interest rates were really going to climb this year, and we were all wrong. The interest rates have come back down. Now is the best time to buy a property with debt ever. I mean, there's just a lot of debt out there that banks want to invest. And so that's on the positive side right now. So people are getting really good interest rates. And so I think that that's the positive side of it. There's still a lot of good opportunity in Utah. There's still a lot of good value add projects out there, but just like you said, there's going to be less of them. The velocity that we've seen this year has slowed down quite a bit. We're at about, compared to last year, it seems like we're around 50% of the amount of deals that sold last year. have sold this year, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So the velocity across the market has slowed down a little bit. And I actually think that it was because of that interest rate hike towards the end of the year. I think because real estate's a long business. It takes several months to get deals where they need to go. We're thinking that the second half of this year is going to be really good. We think we got slowed down by the interest rates a little bit earlier this year. So where's the market going? I think a lot of it has to do with that. I think that is going to be a key indicator for anybody, any investor. What is the debt that you are going to be able to get on these properties? Because even in those value add deals, a lot of times you need to get a bridge loan, and a bridge loan that's going to help you bridge the gap from buying the property, getting it renovated, and then refinancing at the end of that bridge loan into a new loan at that time. So
yeah, well, and I think in any market we have different challenges, right? In the market today, the deals are starting to become more difficult to come by, but the debt is a lot easier to be had. Whereas in the shifting market, the deals might be more plentiful, but debt could be very challenging to come by.
Exactly.
So it sounds like that regardless of the market you're in, there's going to be opportunity and there's going to be challenges, and you just got to work through it and take advantage of what you can.
Yeah, and I think in that vein, like one thing I've talked with my dad about, I mean, he's done real estate for a long time. They used to do seller financing all of the time because they could get better rates seller financing than they could with the banks. So in the future, that could happen again. I mean, if the interest rates that the banks are offering are going to go up too high, seller financing could become the new trendy way to sell properties. So we never know. There's always going to be opportunities in the ups and the downs. It's just the people that are smart and are going to be adapting to whatever the opportunity is out there that are going to be able to continue to make money.
Yeah. Switching gears just slightly, I'm interested in how much of your time is spent acquiring listings versus working with buyers. My guess is that almost all of your time is spent acquiring or looking for listing opportunities. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it's accurate. I mean, we have a saying here, this is a 100% commission type job. So we're always told, if you can list, you'll last. So in other words, if you can list properties, you're going to be a long-term real estate broker. So that is definitely a huge focus that we spend a lot of time on that. But on the flip side, one of the ways to convince people to list with you instead of another broker is your access to buyers. So I have to generate buyer leads and work with buyers looking for properties so that when I go and say, hey, Mr. Seller, look at this list of buyers that I have that are interested in your exact property type. I'm going to be able to put this in front of them day one and generate, and hopefully generate a very competitive environment for you, Mr. Seller.
Yeah.
And so honestly, I guess you asked me earlier, what are some of the challenges of the brokerage life? That's one of them, is finding balance. You've got to generate new leads for new listings, and you've got to work with buyers. So if I had to put it to percentages, I would say 60 to 65% of my time is probably spent on listings, and the rest, the 35% is probably spent on the buy side.
I want to start winding down a little bit. I always ask 3 questions to sort of wind things down. So I've got 3 rapid fire, just your gut reaction questions for you. Ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. Let's go.
All right. What's the biggest mistake you've made on your apartment investing journey so far?
Not starting earlier and not doing more of it. Yeah. Me and my wife, we flipped a couple houses, but I wish that we would have just started earlier. I think the biggest thing that held me back from doing more was money. But as I've been a broker, I've been working with a lot of syndicators that are finding money. Money's out there. You've just got to be able to put in the work to find the money. And it's a job. It's not easy. It's not going to be one Facebook post and you're going to have a perfect investor. You're going to have to reach out to people and find good money and people that are serious about closing and buying properties. But it's out there because a lot of the buyers that we work with right now are doing that in the syndication world.
That's great. What's the biggest win you've had so far on your apartment investing journey?
That's a good question. Probably starting out was the big win, just getting going, but also just securing a couple listings and bringing them all the way to the closing. has probably been the biggest win. Like I said, you want to have that track record. And since you're starting out new, that track record is going to be really small. So the small singles and doubles that I've been able to hit over the last 19 months have been huge successes for me. Whereas in 20 or 30 years, they just might seem like small pennies. But right now, they're everything.
Last question for you. What's the best advice you have for someone who's just starting their apartment investing journey?
Two things. Probably become knowledgeable with the market. Realize, if you're going to target Utah, you need to know what a realistic return in Utah is going to look like. I get calls from buyers a lot that are saying, hey, I'll buy everything with a 7% cap rate. And I think in my head, well, of course you would. I would too. Everybody will. And it's kind of having like, if you're going to be serious and you're going to work with a broker and I'm going to spend time on you, I need you to be realistic with what you're trying to do. I'm going to try to find you the best deal possible. I'm going to do everything that I can to answer your questions and work with you. But there's got to be some realism so that I'm not wasting my time with people that aren't serious about the area I'm working in.
All right, man. Well, Kriss, thank you so much for taking some time, sharing with us a little bit about your journey into the multifamily space. Great. Love hearing about the experience that you've had in, your first roughly 2 years being in the business, and some of the tips and strategies you have, and walking us through, all that a broker does to eventually get an opportunity in front of potential investors. So thanks for that. How can any of our listeners connect with you if they have any questions about what's going on in the market here in Utah?
My work email is probably the best place to start, and that is I'm Kris with a K, so it's K Mortensen, Mortensen at MarcusMillichap.com.
Awesome. And we'll have your contact info in the show notes. And again, Kriss, thanks for taking time. I appreciate it and hope to connect with you again soon. Hey guys, thanks for listening in today. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Please hit that subscribe button or leave us a quick review. Also, don't hesitate to reach out to us on Instagram, Facebook, or at apartmentinvestingjourney.com. See you next week.